Hey, campfire crew, let's get it on. Weird story from years ago by Thank You for the Venom. This happened years ago, but I remember it like it was yesterday. I don't even believe in ghosts or anything, and I'm sure there's a logical explanation for this somewhere, but it still freaks me out. My stepfather worked out of town, and he used to stay the whole week away from the family, and we had a tradition of all taking turns having sleepovers when he was gone. It was my turn to have a sleepover in my mom's bedroom, which had always freaked everyone out. I mean, seriously, if there's ever been a ghost in the house, it was definitely back there. I'm not going to get into all of the shit surrounding that room because that's not the point of this story, but just know that that bedroom is weird. We were always hearing stuff moving around in there, scratching and pounding at the door, bathroom and closet lights flickering, weird stuff. But anyway, at the time, everyone was pretty scared and never wanted to be in there by themselves. During the sleepover, my mom said she was going to go outside and smoke a cigarette, and she asked me if I wanted to keep the light on until she got back. Of course, I told her to keep the light on. She went outside, and I was kind of just chilling in the room for a few minutes, trying not to be freaked out, when the lights went out, and I felt someone get into the bed next to me. I thought it was my mom, so I didn't even turn around. I just said something stupid like, "Hi," or "Welcome back," and my mom started rubbing my back, and her hands felt ice cold. But of course, she had just been outside smoking, so of course she would be cold. She kept rubbing my back, and then started scratching it, and it actually really started to be uncomfortable. It actually started to hurt. It wasn't a normal back rub or back itching anymore. I mean, she was hurting me. I told her to stop, and at first she didn't. But after I asked again, everything went back to a nice, normal back rub. That's when my mom came in the room and was all like, "Hey, I thought you wanted the light on." And I was like, "Yeah, I did, but you came back a few minutes ago, remember?" She said, "No, I just came back inside right now." So of course I was feeling confused and a bit freaked out. And at that point I finally rolled over to look at her, and she was just now getting into bed. I asked her again if she was sure she was just now coming in, and she was like, "Yeah, I just finished smoking." Which I thought was weird, because then who had just been rubbing my back? I thought maybe I had imagined the whole thing and asked my mom if she could shine her phone's flashlight on my back because it felt itchy. And when she looked at it, she said it was all red with scratch marks. So anyway, yeah, I still think about this literally years later, and I'm still like, what was that all about? They Followed My Partner by Laguna Lenta. My partner and I had a really unsettling experience, and I can't shake the what-ifs. I was asleep during the incident, but I woke up to the sound of him rushing back inside our apartment and locking the door. When he told me all the details, it left me with an uneasy feeling that I just can't get past. We live in a suburb that has a reputation for being a bit rough, but a lot of the crime and drug problems are contained in the center of the suburb. Our area is quite sheltered from those problems, and during the day it's busy and full of people, with a university, a hospital, and locals going about their business. At night, the streets near our building are quiet, but not in an unsettling way. It's usually peaceful as we're tucked away from the main road and surrounded by other apartments and a park. However, the past week has made me feel like things are changing. Last week, we heard a couple arguing loudly in the street from our balcony. It escalated quickly and turned physical, so we called the police, who ended up showing up and intervening. Then, just a few nights later, we saw a car pull up near the park. A woman jumped out and ran into the trees, hiding, while a man in the car drove away. He didn't follow her, but we've seen them in the park before. They both looked like methed-up gym rats. He was often yelling at her and calling her stupid, amongst other colorful names. Anyway, we never saw that woman come out of the park and didn't even know if she was still hiding. That time, we didn't call the police. Maybe it was the feeling that it wasn't worth reporting until it got worse, after already reporting an incident just a few days prior. All those were domestic incidents, and I think this reluctance to report suspicious occurrences carried over when this encounter happened with my partner. He told me later he didn't want me to get a reputation for calling the cops over everything, like the boy who cried wolf. But I wish we had done it sooner. Around 1 a.m., my partner took our dogs out for a quick toilet break before bed. When he returned to the building, he noticed a man and a woman standing outside an apartment on the ground floor, quietly talking. He'd never seen them before, but he didn't think much of it, as there are 8 floors in our building, with about 12 apartments on each. He entered the lift, and just as the doors were closing, the man stopped them with his hand and asked if my partner could take them to level 7, as they were locked out. They must have followed somebody through the doors to get inside initially. My partner explained that residents can only access their own floors and told him no. Thinking back, they would have had to have sprinted from where they were to reach the doors before they closed when my partner got on, which is what had me questioning my partner's situational awareness, but I'll continue this story. The man shrugged and said, "All right, well, any level will be fine." And both he and the woman stepped into the lift. My partner told me that he just froze and was trying to analyze the situation in real time. He said they didn't look like typical meth users or necessarily were threatening, but their energy seemed unpredictable. He didn't know how they'd react if he pushed back. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up. He knew something wasn't right. Not wanting to escalate anything, he let them in the lift, and as it went up, the man was looking at my partner in silence while the woman was crouching towards our dogs, making kissy faces. Even this contrast was unsettling for my partner, as there were no obvious threats there. I mean, in fact, you could argue that she was being nice. When the lift reached our floor, the couple told him to step out first, and then they followed him. My partner walked quickly to our apartment, noticing they weren't too close, but definitely were behind him. And as soon as he got inside, he locked the door immediately and started listening. For the next 5 or 10 minutes, we could hear them pacing up and down the hallway, talking in low voices. We couldn't make out what they were saying, but their calm tone made it even creepier. At one point, they opened the fire escape door across from our apartment and held it open while still talking in low voices. Eventually, they let it close, and after that, everything went quiet. Since we don't have a peephole, my partner got on the floor by the door, trying to see them through the crack underneath. I crouched with him, but we could only make out faint movements before they finally left. An hour later, after we were certain the hallway was silent, we carefully opened the door and checked the hallway and fire escape together. The two were definitely gone, but my partner was still shaken. He kept replaying the situation in his head, wondering if they could have hurt him if he had refused to let them stay in the lift. I insisted that we report them to the police and ended up providing their descriptions just in case they were still loitering around. I wish he hadn't let them see where we lived, but I understand why he froze. He keeps saying their energy was off, and he didn't know what they might do if he told them no. I'd like to think I'd have refused to let them in the lift at all, but honestly, I don't know how I'd react at that moment. The thought of what could have happened if they lashed out makes my stomach turn. The whole week has made me feel like our area isn't as safe as it once was, and this incident was the final straw. I mean, why would they follow my partner to our floor, linger for so long, and hold the fire escape door open before committing to leaving? Their calmness only made it more unnerving. If they were truly dangerous, they would have forced their way inside as my partner opened the door. And it leaves me with some hope that they were just opportunists, and maybe I don't need to worry about them coming back at night. The door is double bolted and the extra lock is on. My partner's now sleeping soundly as I'm sharing this, but I'm still wide awake and alert. So, to the man and woman who said any level should be fine and followed my partner to our door, let's not meet. Something in Our Apartment by Chef. Bear with me, this is a lot, but it's worth getting through it so you know what we have been going through. I'm going to tell you all the most noteworthy moments that we've experienced, as I'm sure that there are some that I don't remember, or that are still unexplainable, but so many have happened it's just hard to keep track. Everything started about 4 or 5 months ago. I live in an apartment with my wife and son and our cat. This was our first unexplainable moment. I was sitting at my desk in our room playing video games, and our closet, which has 2 doors, was directly to my left. My chair only blocked my side of the closet, so my wife still had access to hers even if I was at my desk. She came into the room and grabbed something from the closet and then closed the door. And this is where our stories misalign. My point of view is this. She came into the room, got something from the closet. I got up from the desk, and from my peripheral view, I saw her laying in bed. I sat at the foot of the bed with my back to her and began grabbing clothes off the floor to get a load of laundry ready. I asked her if the clothes near her desk needed to be washed, and she replied, "Everything on my desk is clean." I replied, "Okay," and finished getting the load ready. Once I finished, I sat up and turned around to talk to her, and there was nobody on the bed. I was confused and immediately went to the living room. As I entered, I asked if she was just in our room, and she told me that she hadn't been there, and that for the past couple of minutes she was feeding the cat and was in the kitchen with him. I asked her again if she was lying in bed, and she said she hadn't been, and I had never asked her anything about laundry. Now, her point of view was, she came into the room and grabbed something from the closet and then left the room to go to the kitchen to feed the cat. As she was leaving the kitchen, I was coming from the living room confused and a bit scared, and asked her if she was just in the room with me. She never went to bed. So who the fuck did I see get into our bed, and who did I speak to? Another time, we were lying in bed and we were facing each other. My back was to the entrance of the room and hers wasn't. All of a sudden, she began to panic and told me to turn around. I turned around and I saw nothing. She told me that she saw the silhouette of a person peeking over from the entrance. Then as she noticed it, it slowly moved away to where she couldn't see it anymore. She was very, very scared and couldn't fall asleep, and neither could I. Within that same week, she called me crying and scared because she saw another silhouette of a person, but this time in the kitchen. Later, we were in our room and it was late at night. Our kiddo was asleep and the cat was in the room with us, and I was at my desk and my wife was in bed. Suddenly, I heard a very loud thud coming from our door, so I got up to investigate, and our son's Nito ice cube was directly in the front of our door. This type of toy is heavy, it doesn't bounce, and we have carpet. The toy had been on our dresser, and the dresser is far enough from the door that there was no way the toy falling would have hit the door, and it definitely wouldn't have made such a loud hit. We tested it. We slowly slid it from the dresser a couple of times, and it only fell a couple of inches from the dresser. The only way it could have reached the door is if it was thrown from the dresser hard enough to hit the door and make that loud sound. I have a pair of headphones that when I'm not using I keep in their box. And I know for a fact that when this happened they were in their box because I had recently taken a picture of them to put them up for sale. While I was at work, I asked my wife if she could send me another picture, but she told me the box was empty. That couldn't be. I always kept them in the box and never take them out unless I'm actively using them. When I got home, we searched every nook and cranny of the apartment, and the headphones were nowhere to be found. Fast forward a couple of days later, and she opened our closet and noticed that they were on a coat hanger with one of my jackets. It was a jacket that I hadn't worn in a long time, and we'd both gone into the closet multiple times since the headphones disappeared. We never saw them. We keep our iron on the top shelf of our closet and don't need to use it too often. We both knew it was up there in its designated spot. On this day, I went into our son's closet to grab something for him. He's 7 and can't reach the shelves in his nor our closet. I went into his closet and noticed that the iron was on the floor. And I waited until my wife got home from work and asked her about it. And she said that she hadn't used it nor moved it. A couple of nights ago, we were sleeping and we were both startled awake by a very loud metallic noise. We immediately got up and it sounded like it was coming from my desk. So I looked over, and between the desk leg and wall, there was a marble. It hadn't been there before. We concluded that maybe the marble had been on my desk and rolled off and hit the desk leg on its way down, making that super loud noise. But I went to the bathroom, and when I came back into the room, the marble had been placed on my pillow. I felt goosebumps as my wife had fallen back asleep. So I woke her up to ask her if she had put it there, and she promised me she hadn't. I grabbed the marble, opened the window, and threw it out. Fast forward a night or two later, and I was on my desk, and I shuffled with something, and everything that should have been there was there. Later in the night, my wife sat on my chair, and she immediately noticed a fucking marble on my desk. Now we need to mention, our son had lost his marble privileges a long time ago, and he had tried to put one in his mouth. We threw the second marble out as well. Due to everything that's been happening, I used the bathroom with the door open due to having something knock on the bathroom door multiple times, even when I'm home alone. My logic is, if that the door is open, no one can knock on it. When this happened, I didn't have my phone with me, it was charging, and I know for a fact that my wife was in our kids' room with him and hadn't left that room. There I was, sitting on the toilet with my own thoughts, and I noticed my wife walking from the living room into our son's room. I immediately asked her if she had just gone inside, and she said that she hadn't. She had been in the room since I went into the bathroom. We confirmed with our son, and she had been inside with him the entire time. Another time, I went to my desk and noticed a paper towel on my desk with this really black stain on it, almost like someone used the paper towels to clean black ink. I asked my wife if she had done it. It didn't have an odor or anything, it was just bizarre. Nothing in our home really would make such stains like that, and she would never just leave trash on my desk like that. And since everything that's been happening, we would not be messing with each other like that. So I got to the kitchen sink and burned the piece of paper towel. Fire is a cleanser, right? I went back to my desk and noticed these 2 black drips on my desk. I was thrown off, and I looked at the top of it, and it was this black liquid, a bit sticky. I managed to clean it off, and whatever had dripped down onto the screen was dry. So, coming onto the wet wipes I used, it was staining the same way the paper towels had been stained. The second instance of this black liquid happened a day or 2 after. I was home with our kiddo, and my wife was at work. I was in the living room watching TV most of the day, and I went to pick her up from work, so my son and I made a grocery list and headed out. When we came back from grocery shopping after putting everything away and getting dinner ready, I headed over to turn the TV on. That's when I noticed 2 more black drips on our TV, the same way that they'd appeared on my monitor. I cleaned them off, and once again there was no odor or anything of that sort. But today, before heading out for work, I went to grab my wallet, which was sitting on top of some papers. When I grabbed it, I noticed that the paper underneath had a bunch of black stains similar to the ones I mentioned on the paper towel. My wallet also had stains on it, and the liquid was fresh. I immediately took everything out of my wallet and threw it out. My wife believes that my negativity and anger are attracting something. We've had someone bless our home, but it hasn't seemed to change anything yet. The Man with Surgical Gloves by Canadian 767. This story is 100% true, and it's always creeped me out. I think about it a lot. About 3 years ago, I was out for a late-night walk in a park that was about 2 blocks from where I lived at the time. It was a pretty safe neighborhood, so I often felt comfortable walking around alone during the late hours. I remember it being around 3:30 in the morning. Don't ask why I was up that late or walking around during that time. Let's just say I was going through some stuff. In hindsight, I know it wasn't smart, especially as a young woman. Anyway, I approached the park, which was lined with large bushes. There was also a street next to the park, and on the other side of the street a large grassy field. Suddenly, I spotted a bald man carrying large objects wrapped in black plastic. He had on blue surgical gloves and a long plastic jacket. We seemed to be transporting these bagged items from across the street from the park and into the field. I stopped and watched for a moment. As he began crossing the street again with more bagged items, he stopped when he saw me and then ran toward the bushes. He stuffed the bags into the bushes and then hid in them. I could see him clearly, and the whole situation gave me bad vibes. I quickly turned around and started walking back home, and I glanced back to make sure he wasn't following me, but I saw his bald head peering over some bushes staring at me. I started speed walking, and when I was about a block away from home, I saw him sprint across the street and hide behind a large tree. Again, all I could see was his bald head peering around the side of the tree, staring at me. By that point, my heart was racing, but I kept walking quickly. I didn't want to run because I didn't want him to know I could see him following me. My thought process was, if a lion's stalking you, it's not a good idea to run because they'll start chasing you. I just focused on staying calm and getting home safely. Finally, I reached my house and locked both the front and back doors, and I tried to shake off what had happened and go to sleep. The next day was completely normal. I decided to walk to the park in the daylight where there would be lots of people around, and I checked the bushes to see if he'd left anything behind, but there was nothing there. Later that night, I sat down to watch a movie, and I decided not to go on any more late-night walks after that incident. I mean, even though nothing happened to me, it was creepy, and I realized it could have turned into a bad situation. You never know what someone like that is capable of, and it definitely seemed like I had caught him doing something suspicious. While I was watching my movie, I got up to grab a glass of water. My kitchen has a window next to the sink with a view of the backyard, and I always kept the kitchen lights off at night so I could keep an eye on the yard without anyone being able to see me. When I looked out into the backyard, to my surprise, I saw the man standing in the middle of my yard, just staring at my house. I knew it was him because even in the dark, I could make out his pale, bald head. I immediately cracked open the window and yelled, "Hey!" He took off running, leaving the gate to my fence wide open. Since then, I haven't seen the man again. I still have no idea what he was doing that night or what his intentions were in following me home and stalking my house. But I don't think I want to know. I think my parents and I met an angel, by Fantastic Angel. The details in this story are a bit blurry because it happened over 35 years ago, but I'll try my best to remember everything and fill in details where I don't remember fully. It was back in 1988 and I was 5 years old. Me and my family, my mother, brother, sister, and father, and our aunt were on a road trip from Alabama to Orlando, Florida. The ride took about 7 or 8 hours, and we had been on the road for maybe 3 or 4, because I remember my brother asking my dad where we were, and he said about halfway. We needed to stop to take a rest, so my dad pulled into the gas station to fill up the tank, and he went to a 7-Eleven right next to the gas station. As everyone was leaving the car and heading for the 7-Eleven, my dad waited by the door for me to get out. My aunt yelled from a few feet away that she was going to take my brother and sister to the toilet, and I got out of the car, and the second I did, an older woman appeared. She was standing right next to my dad. These details are very blurry, and I can't remember for sure, but I think the woman wore a yellow dress with a yellow hat and had some kind of flower on it. Her shoes were light pink, and she also wore sunglasses. When my dad noticed her, he jumped up in the air in fear, saying, "Holy shit, you scared me!" The woman didn't react to his response, but instead turned to my mother and said, "She is going to die." My mom looked concerned and asked, "Wait, what? Who is going to die?" Then she turned her face to me. She is going to die." My dad didn't take her words kindly and asked her to get the fuck away from us and to stop harassing us. She then just walked away to the parking lot, and my mom was very concerned about what the woman had said, but my dad just told her she was a nut job. My aunt, sister, and brother returned to the car and asked why we hadn't brought any snacks, but my dad just came up with an excuse and we got back on the road. For the rest of the trip, we didn't bring it up or talk about it. We got to Orlando and visited our cousins, and we stayed there for 5 days. My mom is superstitious and is a believer in religion and the paranormal, and she couldn't shake off the words that the woman had said. She became extremely worried and went to a hospital in Orlando to check me up. The doctor did some tests and later told my mom, "It was very good you brought your daughter in because we found 2 blood clots in her left leg." I didn't need surgery. The doctors gave me medicine called blood thinners, and it removed both of them. After a week staying in the hospital, I was checked out and I got to go home. And on the way home, my parents stopped at the exact same gas station and asked the manager if they had security cameras around the property. They said yes, and my parents begged them to watch the footage. After a while of requesting to see the footage, the manager finally allowed it. My mom got a crease in her forehead and a funny look in her eye when she told me the next part. The manager got the security footage back to the exact date and time we visited the gas station. In the security footage, it showed my parents' car rolling in and parking right in front of the camera. My brother and sister rushed out of the car with my aunt heading for the bathroom. You can see me, my mom, and dad, but no woman. The woman wasn't in the footage. You can see my parents talking to nothingness. It looked like they were just talking to the air. Like there was no woman there. My mother is sure they saw a lady, and both my parents knew that it couldn't have been a hallucination because both of them saw her. My mom was convinced that it was an angel or something else not from this world trying to save me. But my dad just thinks it was all a crazy coincidence, and the footage was just a glitch that the lady wasn't seen. But it has to be an extremely fucking rare coincidence that a lady said that I was going to die, and that I actually was going to die, and that she wasn't seen on a security camera. But honestly, I don't know. Was it an angel or not? I'll never know. But it is crazy to think that if my parents hadn't met that lady and hadn't taken me to the hospital to do a random checkup, I would most likely be dead. The Scariest Camping Experience of My Life by Signet Society. When I was in my early 20s, I drove down to Tucson, Arizona from Colorado to spend the weekend with my best friend and his girlfriend. He and I had one of the nights set aside for us to go camping in the desert for the night. Something we had done countless times already throughout our lives, so it wasn't anything we were really excited about. The region we planned on camping in was due south of Tucson, but still well north of Nogales and the U.S.-Mexican border. Cut to us arriving at the site in broad daylight, having a great time enjoying the arroyos and views. We set up camp for the night and sat out in folding chairs watching the amazing stars overhead before we passed out. The road we were parked off of had two directions and was narrow, either from Tucson towards Mexico or vice versa. As we sat peacefully, a large vehicle with insanely bright blue headlights rounded the corner coming from the south. Even from hundreds of feet away, they absolutely blinded us with those headlights. And instead of continuing down the road, they noticed our tents and pulled off towards us. As they got closer, we could tell this was not a border patrol truck. It was a very nice all-black Escalade, with tinted windows you could barely see through. The front two doors opened, and two Hispanic men in flashy, nice clothes got out and walked up to us. The headlights were still on and blasting us with light from up close, casting an ominous silhouette on the two men as the light shined from behind them. They asked us, "Which way to Tucson?" We were speechless for a second, but I finally told them it's down the road and the way they were headed. They stared at me hard in the eyes for several moments until I was probably visibly rattled. I was fully convinced we were about to be executed or worse right then and there. The two guys just started laughing their asses off and said, "Have a good night, white boys," and drove off towards Tucson. We didn't sleep so well the rest of the night. It may just seem like just another simple conversation, but that shit shook us so hard we both said nothing of it the next morning, and for years afterward. I brought it up to him last year and we reflected on it. We both agreed they were probably cartel, and were out just trying to strike fear into us. Well, they succeeded. And because of those headlights, for the life of me, I can't even remember what their faces looked like, even standing right in front of me. But honestly, I'm glad I don't remember. There are some parts of the desert you just don't go to. Childhood School Friend by Bike OK. I've never had too many experiences I could deem creepy in my life. Honestly, I live a pretty mundane but fun life. However, I had an experience with an old acquaintance from school that kept me pretty paranoid for a good bit of my childhood years. I'm not going to give anyone the real names of these people, so I'll just call the girl in the story Jess. For a while during my school years, starting in elementary up to middle school, I went to school with Jess. I wasn't friends with her, but I knew her, and I wouldn't turn down any time to talk with her. She was always very odd in the way she presented herself. She was always dainty and sort of kept to herself, and it may be odd to say, but she had an almost ethereal vibe to her. Blue eyes, complete albino white hair, and was always very soft-spoken, very princess-like. I always approached her, but nothing else much for a good while. You know, the usual early childhood school acquaintances sort of dynamic. One day, I was at our local park during the weekend when she and her little brother came to the park. It was a bit of a surprise, but a welcome one. I played the usual park games with them, caught up, and in general just had a good time. And eventually we ended up playing hide and seek, and I was the seeker. I found her little brother, and we eventually found her at the top of a slide. Our town's park used to have a giant frog slide where you could sit on a platform at the top and go down 3 different slides. We found her, and as she ran up the ladder when we caught her going down the other end, her tone shifted. I mean, like completely shifted. She had an unnerving, stern expression, a stark contrast to how she had been acting before. She then, without warning, said, "I'm going to kill you," to me. Seeing her have this sudden change and verbal threat towards me genuinely scared me. It made me feel like I did something horribly wrong. I ran and hid somewhere in the park for what felt like a half an hour. Soon enough, she eventually confronted me and came clean. She apologized and revealed to me what she had apparently been keeping from me. She revealed to me that she was actually a vampire. No, I'm not making this up. She told me straight up that she was actually a vampire and was keeping it a secret from everyone to not reveal the truth. This is where I need to bring up a crucial detail about this girl. I mean, for all of my time knowing her, she genuinely, wholeheartedly believed she was a vampire. To this day, I don't believe this was some sort of screwing with people for shits and giggles. She genuinely believed it, eventually told the truth to one of my close friends, and went into disturbing detail about what she was up to during the night, and constantly made sure that I didn't tell anyone. The reason I say that is at the park on that playset that evening, she told me straight to my face that with her powers, she could see what I was doing 24/7. And if I told anyone, like friends, teachers, or even my own parents, she'd come to my house in the middle of the night and kill me. I know, this sounds really stupid, but to me, as a really gullible young kid, I couldn't tell what was real and what wasn't. So as far as I knew, she was genuinely threatening me. I left that park with the knowledge of that idea that she had set in my head, and it genuinely affected me. I kept the secret for years, even after she left the school. I was torn with decisions multiple times in my life, fighting between telling my mom and not telling my mom, since I felt so horrified about what Jess might do to me either way. Eventually, years later, I came to learn that it wasn't real, obviously. But the years I lived with that paranoia in the back of my mind can't be taken back. Even my current friend group agrees about how out of an individual she was and how off-putting she made everyone feel. I know how stupid I seemed back then for genuinely believing it, but honestly, I reacted in the most realistic way I could. It may have been complete bullshit, but the idea of someone threatening to come to your house and kill you in your sleep just isn't normal. Wherever she is, I hope Jess is doing well, and I hope she eventually grew out of that phase she seemed to be in for such a long while. Hey gang, thanks for listening to this episode of Uncle Josh's True Scary Stories. If you have a true scary story of any nature that you'd like me to narrate, email it to unclejoshtruescarystories@gmail.com. I read them all. If you're watching this on YouTube and you've got a second and you liked what you heard, please give the video a thumbs up. Let me know what you thought of the stories in the comments, and maybe even subscribe and share the channel with your friends. I'd appreciate it. Follow me on social media, and of course, if you'd like to take your support of the channel a step further, find a link to my Patreon page in the description, or consider purchasing some Uncle Josh and Campfire Crew merchandise. It's the hottest thing since sunburn. Everyone, be excellent to each other. And until next time, be wary of things that go bump in the night. It could be anything. A ghost, a monster, or the guy next door.